Opposite Detective Pardo in his investigation of the Miami Mutilator is Evan Wright in his investigation into the Masked Maniac killings. In the aftermath of the killings in 1989 and during the subsequent trial, murky details emerged that didn't quite add up. For instance, Jacket says he believes he received calls from the Russian Mafia directing him to kill people. But why were all of his targets members of the Russian Mafia? Questions like this drive Evan to believe there's more to the killings than the police and even the maniac himself know. And he's determined to find the truth. Let's follow Evan's journey through Miami and try to find the truth to the Masked Maniac killings. We first see Evan on November 5th, where he's taking notes on Jacket's trial in the courthouse. Evan's already aware of the police report that claims Jacket was a member of a larger vigilante movement that targeted the Russian Mafia after receiving phone calls. But here, he learns that Jacket believes the calls were coming from the Russian Mafia. He listens as the police chief tells the prosecutor that the police found no physical evidence of the calls. But the defense asks if the police found phone records verifying the calls took place. The chief confirms that they did, and upon further questioning, says they traced them to a club called the Golden Truck Stop that has had links to the Russian Mafia in the past. The defense rests, so the judge adjourns court for the day. Evan leaves and, wanting to find out more about these phone calls, stops by a payphone and calls the Miami Police Department. He gets connected with his friend, Detective Pardo, and asks him if he knows anyone he could talk to about the Golden Truck Stop. Pardo is reluctant to give out the information, but Evan says he owes him a favor, so Pardo gives in and gives Evan an address and tells him to ask for a man named Petrov. Evan arrives at the address to find it's a bathhouse, and tells the bouncer outside that he's here for Petrov, saying Detective Pardo sent him. However, the bouncer brushes him off. In a fit of desperate rage, Evan attacks the bouncer and beats him to death. Evan instantly feels regret and attempts to revive the man. He races into the building asking for someone to call an ambulance. However, the gangsters inside attack Evan as soon as they see him. Attempting to avoid further killing, Evan incapacitates his attackers and dismantles their guns. However, if he's pushed too far, he forgoes his caution and begins slaughtering the gangsters. Either way, he makes his way to his sauna on the second floor and finds Petrov inside. He tells Petrov he's writing a book about the Masked Maniac and that Pardo said he could tell Evan more about the killings. Impressed that Evan risked his life for a scoop, he allows him two questions. First, Evan asks Petrov if he believes the murderers were part of a vigilante movement. Petrov says he doesn't believe they were disorganized vigilantes, as they knew their exact locations and had insights into their inner workings. Then, Evan asks why Petrov believes the murderers were attacking the Russian Mafia specifically. Petrov says he doesn't know, but they destroyed their whole organization and then disappeared. He comments that they were well trained, and any vigilante that was caught never broke to torture and interrogation. He then abruptly kicks Evan out of the building. Later that night, Detective Pardo offers to buy Evan a beer and they meet up at a bar. Evan is exhausted from his day, and Pardo is surprised to hear that Evan actually went to meet Petrov. Evan's upset with Pardo for sending him into danger, but Pardo merely suggests Evan write about the Miami Mutilator case instead, saying it's more sophisticated and safer, and that everyone will have forgotten about the vigilantes by the time Evan's book is out. Since he bought Evan a beer, he tries to say they're even, but Evan says he still owes him one. Pardo reluctantly accepts and reminds Evan that his job is on the line. Evan mentions that he's surprised Pardo hasn't been fired already, hinting that Evan knows of some kind of misconduct by Pardo, but willingly turns a blind eye to it. The two then leave the bar. About a week later, on November 11th, we see Evan alone in his home. We can see in the bedroom that the bed has two sides made, and there's also a crib. There's also a separate bedroom filled with children's toys, which shows Evan has a family. On the kitchen table is a note from his wife who left him breakfast. However, Evan doesn't eat and instead notices a message on his answering machine. He checks his message to hear that someone saw his ad in the paper and is willing to give information about the masked murderers in exchange for $200. However, before Evan can go meet with the stranger, he has somewhere else he needs to go first. He sets out from his home, and while riding the subway, a homeless man approaches and asks Evan for money. Evan uncomfortably offers some, but then suddenly the man puts on a rooster mask and refuses Evan's dirty money. Evan is confused, and suddenly the man takes the mask off, and instead of the homeless man, Evan's wife Sharon appears and rescinds him for freely handing out money. She tells Evan that he should quit trying to be a writer and to get a job again so that they can feed their kids. Still confused, Evan asks what's going on, and Sharon threatens to take the kids and leave him. Evan tries to reassure her, saying the book will change things, but he just needs more time. Then, the man puts the rooster mask on again and tells Evan that he doesn't have any more time, and to reconsider his priorities. Evan asks him to clarify, and a flash of white reveals a homeless man in front of him, again refusing his money. This sequence highlights the internal conflict within Evan. He's torn between finding the truth and keeping his family, but he can't have one and keep the other. Although he believes he can have the best of both worlds, the time will come when Evan will have to make a decision between the book and his family. As the man angrily walks away, Evan wonders why he put on that mask, and why it seemed like the mask itself was talking to him. He gets off at his stop and has to fight off gangsters that have claimed the stop as their territory. He safely makes it out of the subway and makes his way to a nearby house. He lets himself in and greets a woman in the living room. It's revealed that her son was involved in the masked killings 2 years prior, and Evan has a few questions for her. She says she doesn't know how her son got involved, but noticed he had been acting differently, saying he was going to see old friends that she didn't know he had. She didn't think much of it at the time and reveals it's because she felt guilty about holding him back since he had always taken care of her. She says she visited him a few times in prison, but he never revealed anything about what happened, saying it was better if she didn't know. Evan then asks if he's been in contact since he escaped from prison, but the woman refuses to say anything. Evan says he'd really like to talk to her son, and the woman says that if he's in contact, she'll give him Evan's number. Evan thanks her and asks if he can look around the house. He makes his way to her son's room where, on the desk, he finds cassette tapes with dates written on them. These tapes are likely recordings of the phone calls made to the woman's son, meaning they're actual proof that the calls took place. He takes the tapes for his book and leaves the residence. Before making his way home, he stops by the address left on his answering machine. Inside, he finds a man with a pink jacket sitting at the bar. The man is visibly drunk, but Evan sits down and listens to his story. The man begins by saying that his memory is blurry, but about 2 years ago, he was killing Russians. Evan, thinking the man is a veteran, asks if he means during the war, but the man says it wasn't during the war, but in Miami. He rambles on, mentioning signing up for some patriotic bullshit, and that's when he started getting the phone calls. Surprised, Evan asks phone calls, and the man confirms that's what he said, mentioning other people were getting the calls as well. He then says he wanted to quit and tried to figure out who was calling. He discovered there was something big behind it all, so he left town and went hiding in the desert. Evan asks him if there was a conspiracy, but the man, thinking Evan is blowing off his words, screams that it was real. Then he mentions that in the desert he met him, and after that meeting, he lost the will to fight. Evan asks the man who he thinks were making the phone calls, but the man says he doesn't know. He then asks for his money, saying he needs another drink. Here, Evan has the truth in front of him, and we, the players, know this man, nicknamed Biker, is recalling his events from the first game and speaking the truth. But given his state, Evan thinks he's listening to the ramblings of a drunkard, and refuses to believe him. Evan says he won't pay unless the man gives him some more substantial information. Seeing that Evan isn't willing to pay, Biker tells Evan to leave. Even though Evan had spoken to the one person that knows the truth, the factors at play prevent Evan from believing Biker's story, and he leaves the bar without gaining some valuable information about the full story behind the masked murders. A few weeks later, on November 27th, Evan manages to convince Pardo to let him into the evidence locker to look at the possessions of one of the vigilantes the police found dead. Hoping to find something that will lead him to the truth, Evan is dismayed when he doesn't find anything. He exits the locker, and since Pardo risked his job to let Evan in there, Pardo says they're even, to which Evan agrees. However, later that night, Evan has a dream that he found a floppy disk among the vigilantes' possessions. Pardo says it contains a list of addresses linked to the vigilantes. Evan gets Pardo's permission to take it and gets the list of addresses printed. He makes his way to one of the addresses to find the building abandoned. He explores the building and finds that it used to house an organization named 50 Blessings, and in the back, he finds a strange sight. There are a number of people with masks all sitting around a red symbol painted on the floor. Here, Evan has another chance to realize the truth. that the people in masks were used by this organization to attack the Russian Mafia. However, the dialogue with the masked individuals shows that Evan still doesn't see the whole picture, and his conversation with them seems to hint that Evan doesn't want to know, preferring to leave the truth in the dark. This is further supported when Evan is scared out of the building back to his home, implying he's more concerned with fixing his home life than finding the truth to the Masked Maniac killings. The next time we see Evan, he's sitting alone at his house, typing in his study. The phone rings, and as he goes to answer it, we see his child's room is empty and the bed stripped. The crib in the bedroom is stripped, and half of the master bed is empty. The threat from Sharon was real, and she really took the kids and left Evan. All he has left is the book. He answers the phone, and a man on the other end says his mother gave him Evan's number, and says he has information about the Masked Maniac killings. Evan says he'd love to hear his story, but the man says he'll only give it out if Evan gets him a plane ticket. Evan says he'll get him one if his story's as good as he says, and tells him to start from the beginning so that he can get the full picture. The man starts telling him about the messages left on his phone. At first, they seemed innocent enough, like calling random numbers and leaving messages, and painting marks at certain places. Evan asks about the mark, and the man describes it as a circle with 3 lines through it. The man says he ignored the messages even when they started getting threatening. Then, one day, he found that his car had been burnt in the night, and there was a message on his answering machine that threatened his mother, Rosa Bird. Here it's revealed that the man is Richter, the man that shot Jacket in the first game. While Evan takes notes, Richter tells him his story, about his part in the slaughter of the Russian Mafia, about his attack on Jacket and his subsequent arrest, about Jacket storming the police station and showing him mercy, even though Richter had taken his girlfriend from him. And it all leads up to his escape from prison on July 20th, 1990. Evan cuts in and says he needs to grab a fresh notepad. As he walks to his study, we can see the house is absolutely covered in notes from Richter's story. This is exactly what he needed to finish his book. He returns to the phone and Richter continues. He tells of 2 strange men that came to visit him in prison. They apparently recognize him, but he doesn't, and asks why they're there. They ominously say they're here to tie up loose ends and bid him goodbye, saying he served them well. They leave, and Richter goes to eat lunch, but the guards push him into the prison yard. Here, he's attacked by a man with a tattoo of 50 on his face and another of a circle with 3 lines cutting through on his neck. Richter is able to fight the man off and escapes the yard to find the prison in a riot. During the confusion, he manages to change into a guard outfit and escape when SWAT, believing him to be a guard, rushes him into a van. Then he says that after his escape, there isn't much to tell. Evan asks where he escaped to, and Richter says he made his way to Hawaii. He reveals the plane ticket isn't for him, but for his mother. Evan says that one way or another, he'll get her a ticket, as it wouldn't be right otherwise, and tells Richter he's been incredibly helpful. Thanks to Richter's testimony, Evan finally has what he needs to find the truth behind the killings and finish his book. As he processes all the information Richter just shared with him, he notices a letter on his table. It's from his wife, Sharon. She hasn't heard from him in a while and says she misses him, as do the kids. She wants to make the relationship work, but says she can't be with someone that places his work before his family. She ends the letter by saying she loves him and asks him to call her when he reads this. Evan now has a serious choice to make. Does he walk to his typewriter to continue working on his book and sacrifice his family? Or does he call his wife and reconcile with his family, thereby sacrificing all the blood, sweat, and tears he's given for this book? His fate is ultimately left to the player, and depending on their choice, he's either shown alone in his house, still trying to finish the book, or together with his family. However, regardless of the player's decision, Evan meets his end at the hands of the nuke that strikes Miami in the aftermath of the assassination of the US and Russian presidents. As Miami burns, you can't help but wonder if Evan had connected the dots earlier, maybe 50 Blessings' plan could have been stopped, and the world spared nuclear disaster. But Evan's inability to discern the whole picture, combined with being torn between trying to keep his family and find the truth, prevented this possibility. It just goes to show you, you can't have your cake and eat it too. but that resolves Evan's storyline. The only other thing to add is he was the one that took the picture of Beard and Jacket that helps fuel Jacket's slaughter of the Russian Mafia, and thus set up the events of Hotline Miami 2. Sorry about the length of the video, but pretty much everything Evan said or did was significant to his story, so it had to be included. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. But until next time, thank you for watching and see you later. I believe Oscar Wilde said it best. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And in Hotline Miami 2, there's a group of veterans that are trying to recreate the events of the first game.